Good evening. October night, the sun going down, evening with its brown and blue, music from another room, evening with its blue and brown, October night, the sun going down. A couple of years ago, Stan called a meeting of open mic volunteers, several of whom are in our audience tonight. We congregated in the apartment he and Linda share, and to commence proceedings, Stan, seated at the living room table's head, cleared his throat, and readying the trajectory of his opening remarks, declaimed thusly, "In the beginning, there was only me." What he intended by way of admittedly awe-inspiring, if vaguely deistic preamble, was to sketch the history of this monthly event, whose 5th season is this evening concluding, as he handed batons onto the comrades there assembled. It is indeed true that Stan is directly responsible for the bodily presence of each of us here tonight, down to the very last hair on our poetry-loving skulls. However, I've become increasingly aware over the past few years that Stan's physical and psychological presence, affecting a demeanor of relative calm as it does presently, is due to the woman who is to introduce him, Linda Burfield, who has, for these past 5 seasons, been operating the book table at the back, is Stan's best friend, and has been his wife for 29 years. She was a professional floral designer all her life and vastly prefers the visual to the verbal, I'm told. And I'll just add that it's a delight and a privilege to call her my friend too. Linda?
Wow, this is unusual, being on this side of the microphone. Thank you, Kevin. Okay. Trapper, farmer, adventurer, journalist, florist, poet, and a writer. The young years. Stan's grandparents on his father's side of the family were born in Hastings, England. They had 3 sons. One was Stan's dad, Fred. The family flourished in their own brewery business until Prohibition. It came along, and unfortunately they've lost everything that they owned. They lost their home, their business, everything that they owned was gone. So Canada was offering at that time free land. If you cleared and farmed it for 3 years, it was yours. Coming to Canada was a very difficult time. Building a 1-room sod house on the Alberta prairies that slept 5 people was even worse. Stan's father eventually had his own small farm, but by this time his dad went blind. Stan helped with chores and had his own track line, where he sold his furs to the Hudson Bay Company. He was around about 8 to 10 years old at that time. He also had a 4-inch tree owl as a pet. It always sat on his shoulder, and he fed it hamburger, and he also taught it to catch grasshoppers until it flew away. It was only about this big. And when it was wet, he would give it a bath, and when it was wet, it was about this big. Stan soon became aware of nature and how beautiful it was. School years. As Stan matured, he decided to go to University of Calgary and took biology courses. He was discouraged with this, so he decided to take up journalism at Mount Royal College. where he got a journalism degree, and he was hired on at the Calgary Herald as a reporter. Deadlines, time, restraints, and stress discouraged him to carry on. Not only that, but also the largest newspaper in Calgary at that time, the second largest in Calgary at that time, went bankrupt. So they ended up hiring the very best in reporters at that time. So there Stan was on a whole new adventure again. His father suggested, why don't you walk across Canada and write about it? So, travels across Canada. Here we go. Stan started out walking from the west coast of Vancouver Island, BC, carrying a 50-pound backpack, and with extremely sore feet, he landed in Thunder Bay, Ontario. It took him 7.5 months to walk there.
Wow. Wow.
Oh,
Wow. How old was he at that time?
How old were you?
31.
31.
Okay. It's a good age.
Yep. The next journey was by canoe. It took him from Calgary to Quebec with a very undesirable canoe partner, but a great dog called Kobuk. It took him around 7 months to do that trip as well. The third journey, this is the last one, so far anyhow. The third journey was a bicycle trip from Thunder Bay to St. John's, Newfoundland. He had to make some money when he arrived there, so he worked on a fishing boat, which was pure hell. And all he got to eat, I'm afraid to say, was cod and crackers the whole time he was on the fishing boat. And you can explain that one later on. Newfoundland is where Stan did some of his best poetry writing, in a tent, in the park, until the snow drove him out. These 3 trips took incredible amount of will and stamina. He did write short stories for a wilderness and adventure magazine. Back to reality. Stan and I met on a blind date in Vancouver, BC. We married and opened up a flower shop. It was only to be for 6 or 7 years. Instead, it ended up being 18 years. In his spare time, Stan wrote poems and put them out on a stand in front of the flower shop. It was a hit. People loved to walk along our street and pick up his poems. We sold our flower shop and went to Hawaii for a month. Then to Gabriola Island, BC. For 2 years, he studied community mental health worker and became a mental health care worker. Now the move, London, here we come. Living on Gabriola Island was fabulous, but getting to the mainland was expensive and long. I had 4 grandchildren by then and in Ontario, so we decided to move to London. Stan carried on with his work looking after mentally challenged children while challenging his own shyness. I guess we all know about that, don't we? He decided at that time to open up London Open Mic Night. He's proud to say it has been a success and definitely helped with his shyness. He has been able to write better poetry and even win a poetry contest. With Stan's retirement, he plans to write a book, more poetry, and stories about his family from the 15th century onwards. Good luck with your newest adventures, darling. You always surprise me. So may I welcome Stan Burfield.
Wow. Yeah, boy, that's amazing. I remember my first time hosting up here 5 years ago, and I was, I could hardly move. I was so scared inside. I was like wood, right? And look at Linda. She's never done anything like this in her whole life. My God, it's incredible. We held together. Maybe you're not as shy as you think you are. I know she is, because she doesn't ever want to go out and meet anybody. She just wants to potter at home. And so, boy, that was something. That made my night, just seeing her do that. And not having a heart attack, not, all of the things that I thought could possibly happen didn't. Wow. Okay, well, before I get into my own poetry, I just have to read Don Gutteridge sent me an email the other day. He's Professor Emeritus at Western. He was our feature in November this season. He has some 22 books of poetry out. And he said, Stan, when I read your biography about your upbringing in Alberta, your years in the flower shop, and your lifelong battle with shyness and its torture, I was moved to write a little poem about your defiance and persistence and the role that poetry played. So I'm just going to read that here because he couldn't come for health reasons, and I think I should read it. It's called Defy, for Stan Burfield. For more than a dozen years you were surrounded by blooms in your shop, a long way from Alberta's unlyrical land, and when you tried your hand at verse, were your first poems for poppies and their roaring red, sonnets for sunflowers burst in lavish light, lyrics for larkspur and their passionate purple, or pentameters for peonies and their kissing cousins? Did you let them speak for you, go soaring through the petrified petal of your fear? For poetry is both bliss and consolation, a way of speaking to the world that subsumes both shy and defy. It's called Defy.
Wow.
Thanks, Don. He's watching there in Sebastian's videotape. All right, so my poems. And you saw Linda, and you can see, like the kind of person she is. How can a guy not totally be in love with her all his life, right? It's not possible. And you'd think I would have a whole lot of love poems. Surprising how few I do have. I do have some. But my sort of attitude about love is, it's not a thing, you know. It's not like 10 pounds of something you got to carry around with you all the time. It's a feeling that sneaks up on you when you don't expect it, you know. So here's this. Some of you, especially the women, will know what this term means: decoupage. It's, you know, it's where you take a picture or something and you paste it onto a vase or something, and it stays on there. You can see it. It's part of the coloration of the whatever it is. Also, you've probably seen made in India these little wee boxes that are lacquered black on the inside and painted with Indian designs all around. Well, there's a heart-shaped one. It's called Heart-Shaped. My sweetheart was watching Flea Market Flip. A buyer had found an old chest of drawers for sale, its front all decoupaged up with a bunch of love letters some lady had left inside it. So that now when you go to get your nightie out, you can sit there and read a few soft words first. Linda looked at me with that look and said, "When are you going to write me another love poem? It's been so long," and laughed, not wanting to hurt. She still has my first one from when we were head over heels in that little heart-shaped box, and opens it now and then. Anyway, she told you about the trips that I was on, and that's really when I started writing poetry, I guess. I started on that hike with that heavy backpack, and I carried, I read in my tent at night a book by Basho, The Narrow Road to the Deep North, and Other Travel Stories, I think it was called, with his little haikus in it. And so then I started writing poems occasionally as I walked along. And this one, so I'll just take one from that trip. This is about 6 months into it, I think. I was in Manitoba. I camped outside of Portage-la-Prairie and got, struck my tent first thing in the morning, went into this little cafe on the outside of town for breakfast. And I'm the kind of person that's always been most comfortable out in the forest and nature, you know, growing up in the country and so on. But in this cafe, I was fascinated by this guy who was just exactly the opposite, totally comfortable in this urban setting, and I couldn't actually imagine it. Anyway, here it is. It's called In Hiking Boots and Leafy Coat. I wedged myself into a corner table for bacon and eggs, my breath tight like a soft-footed coyote in a jagged cage, watching the neat-dressed waiter pad back and forth in the morning sun on the tiled floor of his soft-light cafe in Portage-la-Prairie. To the far wall, the thermostat turns it down, then the counter removes a cup. To the window, too much sun, unaware of the movement of his lungs, inhaling, exhaling, as if asleep, or out in the wild where I came from. The cord between his fingers vibrating normally as he lowers the blinds for the lady at the counter and pours her tea with a murmur as he moves his mouth with his body, not loud, not shy. "Hello, Mrs. James, how are you today?" "Yes, I heard, too bad." He pads away as the sun drops shadow into the room, and slides on up the wall of the sky. Okay, so then, as Linda said, the next year I got on this canoe expedition, Calgary to Quebec City, and me being the shy person and the other people, there was 2 canoes, the other 3 people being very judgmental types. It was very difficult the whole 7.5 months emotionally, but physically very easy compared to walking across Canada. So I didn't write any poems there, and 2 years later I went on this bicycle trip. I started where I left off on my hike and went east. And these solo adventures, for a shy person, trying to get rid of your anxiety. That was my idea when my dad told me that I should try this. I thought, well, yeah, maybe I could write about it, but mainly it'll make me strong. I'll come out, won't have any anxiety. I'll be like one of those Supermen, right? And, but, if I had just gone to a therapist or something, they would have told me, you don't go off on something by yourself to get rid of your shyness. You go, here with people, right? So anyway, it didn't do me much good. I was just more anxious and more shy at the end of it all. But anyway, I'm biking along, and I got into Montreal, and the places where, when you're forcing yourself along day after day, you don't really notice your feelings, your loneliness that much. It's just when you come into a city and you go into sit down in a place with everybody else, and then it really hits you hard. This is called Missing Person Blues. Sitting alone in the Blue Note in old Montreal, silvered surfaces, sip of beer, saxophone blowing into its ocean, waves that nudge, pull me. But I'm wound up tight on my stool, like the others, dark in this bright neon blue room with liquid notes rolling round its walls, waves of bass pulsing so close I feel his lady sway as his fingers press the sax. But no, I am alone, and I've had enough of these tight-gutted guys, these shadow boxers sitting so damn still. So I lift off the stool and shuffle out in my soft shoes, floating over the sidewalk on Hammond high notes, with the feeling of no time, no time, no time left to lose. So anyway, I rolled down into St. John's, Newfoundland, on the ocean, and stayed overnight there, and I was very depressed. I knew that I was just as I hadn't changed at all. I was maybe physically stronger. That's about it. And I knew that if I went home after these 3 big, long attempts to strengthen myself, if I went home now, the rest of my life would just disappear ahead of me. So out of desperation, I pedaled back to a provincial park that I had passed on the way in. It was closed now, and I went in and pitched my tent. And I had read in a book by Rollo May on the way, he had mentioned that poetry is one path into your subconscious. So I thought, I will go and lock myself in there in that closed park and just do poetry and nothing else until, winter came, which was a month and a half later. So that's what I did. All alone, again. But then you know when you're out on some adventure, when you do anything a little bit different than normal, you don't really know what's going to happen, who you're going to bump into in this case. So one day, this really strange occurrence. It's called Cowboy Heaven. I wandered out of the darkening forest to catch the last warmth of the November sun, and found a group of Wild West cowboys there in that closed provincial park on the eastern end of the continent. For a while the trees and I stood observing their strange intrusion with their steady, slow chatter like smoke from a fire, till they spotted me and invited me over, or at least the talking one did, and what a lot of talk it was for a cowboy, even though he wore a bandana just right, and a warm winter vest, and leather chaps, and on his head the hat of a stalwart U.S. cavalry officer, with a little round tin of chawing tobacco back in his hip pocket. He probably even used it. A fire sputtered yellow in the iron grill that the park provided with the picnic table, and their horses, still saddled, sniffed the ground under the fir trees. He introduced me. "Boys," he said, "meet a cowboy from out west. Where'd you say?" "Calgary." He glanced at me uneasily and talked on. Coffee simmered in a tin can. Whiskey was handy in a flask. Most had leather chaps on. One was peeing off to the side. I said, "There are ranches that still round up cattle out by horse out west." A young guy looked up from the fire and said that's what he'd really like. And I could see it in him, as quiet as a prairie night. And then the talking cowboy said, "Some do. Some of the boys will be working here, but come the first cool weather, you'll see them loading up their bags. Them that don't get saddled with a wife, that is. They'll mosey on down south, maybe hitch up with an outfit in Texas, then work the winter in Wyoming." Not him, though. Not without his buddies behind him. We drank the good, strong coffee that was boiling in the big tin cup, with a gulp of whiskey from the flask, but night was moving in. They saddled up one at a time, and finally, out of a good old movie, the cavalry officer shouts, "Yo!" And they pulled out with the sound of hooves clattering on gravel and someone whistling, "On the road again." I wandered along the chilly lake shore, watching Venus and Mars follow the trail of the sun over the western horizon, and the stars blooming all around me. As I gazed out past the moon into that great spread of the galaxy, I wondered how many real cowboys up there were sitting contentedly by themselves beside their fires on prairie planets, gazing up like me into the blossoming heavens, just whittling some wood or humming a tune. I come from the real ranch country, you know. It all seemed a little bit weird to me. I was on a real adventure there, and that, you know, theirs was like out of some fantasy, you know. Anyway, so that month and a half in the bush, I was trying to get in contact with my subconscious, because that's where I thought my anxiety was. Somehow it was in there. I didn't have conscious control of it, over it. So, and the book that I had read didn't tell me how to get what's the path to your subconscious through poetry. I didn't know, but I was just writing and reading and memorizing. And eventually, I started to get poems in my dreams at night.
Which troublemaker book
Rollo May, it's called Man's Search for Himself. And yeah, I'd see a poem written on a little banner floating across the sky in my dream. Of course, I couldn't even read it, something about memorizing it, but I knew it was there. It was a poem. And, there others I could hear them being read to me or something like that, but I couldn't remember them. And then I started getting into automatic writing, so hoping that my subconscious would give me some words that I didn't consciously think of. And that happened more and more often. And some of them were kind of nice, and so there's this little poem. This is one of my favorite poems that I've ever written, and it's totally automatic writing like that. It's called The Night Wind, and if anybody in the country on a hot summer day when you just want to get in the shade somewhere, when the nighttime comes and the cool wind comes blowing, it's revivifying. It's like you want to run, you feel like a kid again. So this is called The Night Wind. There was a trumpeter who made his grave among the lilies. No one now can say what the way is. As I grow, so does the ceiling. I stand and lift my hand to the night wind. I'll just read it again because it's so good. And it's like a dream, Dreams are so heavily with metaphor, with symbolism. And this is where this came from, basically, my dream mind. There was a trumpeter who made his grave among the lilies. No one now can say what the way is. As I grow, so does the ceiling. I stand and lift my hand to the night wind. Yeah. I love it. I can read it umpteen times. Because, it's my subconscious that's reading it, not just me, right? Anyway, as the month and a half ended and the snows came, I nearly went insane. So I would not recommend this path to your subconscious to anybody in the future. I got back into civilization, felt very brittle for a while. Met Linda eventually, and we got married and got our flower shop, and my life, in those years was turmoil, inner turmoil. And here's a short little poem that kind of describes that. It's got a lot of subconscious imagery in it too, but it's really the whole thing from the inside out. It's called Needle's Eye. Like the eye of a needle, trying to get a thread through it. Through you, my love, in this city, a tracery of my footsteps, through our dream assemblages, full volumes, resources under duress, and through the open eye of a needle, to the pillared world on one side, the surge on the other. Shaking, I thread it. Yeah. Anyway, back in civilization, what's the epitome of civilized life more than Starbucks? And so So I went into Starbucks and wrote a poem about what I saw. But it sort of reminded me of my father, oddly enough, out on the farm. This is called Permitted Form. Every morning on the farm, my father, looking out the kitchen window at the fields, would gulp down his coffee till the cup was empty. Here inside Starbucks, they wet their upper lips, eyes tremble, oval mouths crinkle, then oval, then crinkle on flat stools, backs erect. And the air is made of gently blended voices. Sentences slip out of a laptop, climb a man's arm, press the hand into the weight of the brow, slide down the slope of the back, firming the form. A woman with her thumb rubs the tight arc of her vertebrae, pushes into a hard chair back, raises arms, the casual stretch, drums feet, lightly scratches flesh, face plowed like a field. Civilization. I don't know, do I have time to read this one?
Yes, Stan, it's your show, honey.
I guess I can. Okay, Linda and I went to Italy. You know, talk about civilization, right? Just shortly before we started the open mic, I think it was 2011. And neither of us had ever been to Europe. So, you know, a lot of arts and sculptures and, you know, architecture and all that stuff. This is called Then I Saw the Vatican. All of us mistook it for some sort of heaven. We paid our fees and streamed in, and by the thousands poured down the heavenly halls, glimpsing above the churning river of our bodies gold, enthroned Madonnas done in oils, frescoes of classical motifs with cherubs looking on, popes in robes surrounded by angels, all proclaimed under high arches, held aloft by Roman columns, each inch worked to the highest art. But we pushed each other on, our tour guide somewhere calling. If I could just stop, absorb all this, I might think of a prayer or at least a good thought. But no, under that grand girth of power and glory, we were ground down like polished stones. Then I discovered this small painting by a little-known artist named Crespi in the old neglected Castle St. Angelo. Alone in a silent inner room, I stood for a long time, just inches from the face of a man worshipped for 2 millennia, ever since the long moment of horror he was living through there in front of me. I was held by his unhurried eyes. They accepted the armored brute who was forcing him forward amid splashes of blood-red spray into the room I was in. It was shocking, really. And I'm not religious. I can still see it, and I just wish I had thought to take a photograph of it. I had a camera. And it's not on the internet anywhere. I've looked. Yeah. Okay. People say, Stanley, you really should read more poetry. Learn the latest styles. Practice, and get published, for heaven's sake. Become known. Be somebody. But to me on this beach, I'm only a pebble falling back and forth in the surge of the surf, a glisten on a ripple on a wave. I had a dream once of endless waves. I would like to write a poem like the sea. I like that poem. It is sort of like the sea. Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, okay. I love this poem. Somebody else written it, I would love it no more and no less. Because it's really heaven for a shy person who grew up in the country. It's like this is a vision of that. And what it was is in a forest park, there's a little stream going along, perfectly straight, surrounded by forest on both sides. It's just a very narrow stream, and right beside it there's a little path that I was walking along. And the sun, the trees are far enough away because of the stream and the path that the sun can shine down in if it happens to be lined up, which it was at this moment. And there was no wind. The air was just slowly moving through the sun. It's called With the Fisherman of the Air. I could be a fish here in this air that moves like an ocean, with seagulls swimming up under the sea blue ceiling and wood seeds drifting like wind-blown plankton, and my round head parting the air and skittering away from my watery eyes these clouds of wide-eyed beings with paddle arms slicing the dripping sun. And in the clouding kelp-green bushes, the intricate nets of diligent spiders, patient fishers of this river of air, who crouch and stare at my drifting figure, no less aware of currents and turbulence of this weightless world I'm floating in. So, that's my last. Well, I do have another poem.
Yes.
But I can't read it because it's being videotaped, and if it's this I worked on really hard last week. I just stumbled across this ad for the CBC Poetry Contest.
So just stop videotape.
Yeah, I thought maybe after the Q&A, I'll just read it then.
Okay.
Before I sit down. And actually, it's a good one for that because it's kind of like about endings.
Oh,
Okay.
Thank you.
Want the Q&A before tributes?
Oh, I don't care. I'm not the organizer.
Okay, he's not the organizer. Apparently I am, okay, after 5 years. So do we want the Q&A or do we want tributes? Q&A, okay. Q&A, anyone have a question to ask Stan Burfield? Yes, Robin.
Stan, do you feel that your own biography has helped a lot in propping up your poetry? I don't mean propping in a lame sense. I mean, has it empowered your poetry to springboard from elements of your life or from autobiography? Or is it just a natural process?
In terms of poetry?
Yeah.
Boy, I keep thinking, it'd be lovely to have a clone of yourself. And how do you know? You can only be yourself. So you can never tell what you would be like if things had ever turned out different. I don't know. I guess that's not a very good answer, but
No, I think you've answered it. Yeah.
okay.
Well, I think, Stan, what Robin is getting at is we've listened to the story of your life, right? This kind of shy, prairie boy, and I didn't even know some of it. Heads off, like walking across Canada, and then canoes the other part, and then cycles, and then hangs out with like crazy cowboys, around a fire, and wow, all of that. But that didn't cure your shyness, did it? It just gave you material. So I think Robin was asking, like, that was the sort of, biography. And then you came here 5 years ago to truly cure your shyness by being with all these people and have to be in a public forum. So you went from these long treks and the flower shop to 5 years of this. And you've written poetry the whole way, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think, why does a person write a poem? I guess, I'm not a poet, okay? I'll tell you what I really am. I really am somebody who loves to understand things. That's me. Poetry is kind of like a side thing. And I'm always trying to understand things. And so I can't speak for anybody else because I don't know anybody that's just constantly theorizing about everything every 5 minutes. And so sometimes I get a poem out of that. Sometimes I get a poem out of my life. But more often than not, I get an understanding to help me understand, a little theory that works as opposed to one that doesn't. And I guess that's why I've never written a book of poems and had it published. I mean, I've never really done it for any reason, just for myself when I feel like it. And what is a poem anyway? Let's face it. Like Don Gutteridge has said in this thing, it subsumes shy and defy. A poem includes everything in your life. It includes your thinking, it includes your feelings of yourself and reality. I mean, if it doesn't, it's not really, you're just tinkering with words. And the best poems that I've written, they don't really do much for other people because they only speak to me for myself, of my own, of all that stuff. So I wouldn't even bother trying to get them published, but I love them myself.
Well, we like them too.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. It's like really hard for me to tell. When I was trying to pick out poems to read, I was thinking, that's too, I don't know. It was difficult. So I don't know.
Question over there, yes.
Well, I don't know if the question is, if it's more an offering. Because one of the things I've realized coming to these groups is how we each have our own stories. And your story is incredible. But what I hear every time I come and hear you is that you emphasize your insignificance. So my offering to you is give that up.
Yeah.
And then publish.
Then publish.
We all need to hear that.
Oh, hey, there's a big change happened last week in my life when I discovered that ad for the CBC Poetry Contest. I dug out, I said to myself, what's my best poem I've ever written? I dug it out and I worked on it. I put in hours and hours making minute changes, and then redoing the whole thing in a different way and then putting it all back the way it was again, and so on and so forth for hours and hours. I talked to my sister on the phone in Calgary and we worked over it, and like now I feel like I'm not just writing for myself anymore. I actually am capable of writing something that society might appreciate to some degree. I'll read that after the yeah.
And Stan Burfield gives up his insignificance, right? Okay, and his shyness. Okay, Question. Anyone else have a question? Yes, Robin. Hey, you already asked a question.
But it's not a question,
Okay.
it's sort of an elaboration of that topic. Stan, I kind of think that the stuff that feels most pleasing to you, that's personal, that you like, and that is your springboard, I've always thought that we find the universal in the particular. And that's what I experience with your poetry, is that whatever you find, oh, it's too particular, no one will like it, it's actually moving into the universal through the particular, and that's what we like about it. So that's...
Yeah, I guess so. That's what they say anyway. I mean, all I can say is I got my own life, I don't know how universal this is. Okay, I'm universal because I am a human being, like we all are. And as I get older, I discover this thing that, every single one of us has got this tremendous thing going, this subjective world we live in, all of us, and they're incredibly different from each other. And so yeah, we're all universally human beings with this huge thing, but we're all individual. And I don't know. Hey, here's something. Geez, it just flashed and oh God, that's ADHD for you. Damn, what was a good one? Yeah, maybe it will. You say something.
Okay, I'll say something and maybe flash back. I just want to say, sort of summarize what Robin just asked. I think really good poetry is when someone gets into the particular, okay, whatever they've experienced, but in fact what they capture is universal, and so that we end up understanding it. Okay, so from the particular to the universal, which you have done beautifully tonight, Stan. There's so many things there I've never heard before. But I think that's what you're sort of saying, right? Okay.
Okay, thank you. No, it didn't
No,
come
we're
back.
going to interpret it, the particular and the universal. It's like a fraction. The numerator is your uniqueness and your own individuality, and the denominator is the universal.
Oh yeah. So in other words, I'm a very tiny fraction, is what you're saying.
We're all
We should-
fractions. We're all fractions.
How can you make the universal smaller and the individual bigger? It would be nice.
If you add everyone, it would be.
Well, Stan is going to have more time. If you want to sit, do you want to sit down here, Stan, in this chair right over here? I think there's a couple of people who want to say things about you. Okay. Okay, I think Ola Noasad has something to say. So how many people are here for the first time? Raise your hands, please. Okay. I just want to say, if you haven't been here before, we always start with a featured poet. Tonight it happens to be the founder and organizer, Stan, who is retiring. And then we have an open mic. So it is open to every genre, every level of experience. We're a very open, appreciative group. So, but this is a kind of unique and special night because we're having some tributes to Stan. So Ola, welcome.
Congratulations, Stan. 15 years ago, my young sister, at age 42, died, and it propelled me, today is the anniversary, it propelled me to writing more poetry and to begin participating in the London poetry community. And one of the marvelous people, and I've met so many, in the London poetry community has been Stan. And Stan has really made his mark and made an awesome contribution, especially in starting open mic. And I admire many things about you, Stan. I admire your sense of adventure, which really came out tonight. And poetry, open mic is a very vivid, vibrant example of your sense of adventure. You took the risks and you did this. And I admire the courage that took, the dedication, the hard work, and the passion. And certainly your poetry has passion. And I want to thank you because it's provided much joy. I've had lots of wonderful companionship here in these evenings and much joy. So thank you very much, Stan.
Anybody else want to say yes? Please, Tom. Tom? Yeah. Tom Cull, who are you again? Like the god of poetry or something? God of poetry, something like that?
God of poetry. Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Cull. I am the Poet Laureate of the city. So I first met Stan, I think 6 years ago. I was running a workshop for Ola and I were running a workshop for Poetry London, and Stan came in. He had been going to these workshops for a long time, and I was a new coordinator, and he was just this wonderful participant in these poetry workshops that we did, and it struck me, a couple of things struck me. His attention to detail in his own poetry, the way that he had this unique way of framing the world with his words, but also the generosity that he had for other participants in the workshop. He was very ecstatic when someone brought a poem, and he would talk about it a lot, and he would give a lot of feedback, and I thought, this guy could stand to be a bit more shy, actually. But no, I always looked forward to Stan being there because I knew that there was going to be somebody who was going to be very generous and very warm with newcomers who were bringing their poems for the first time to read. And of course that generosity has flowered into open mic, and I'm very thankful for open mic. Think of the many Wednesdays that all of us have come here, have relaxed after a long day of work, have had a beer, have sat back and listened to great poetry. So I thank you, Stan, for that. It's surprising, as Poet Laureate, I'm actually given very little power, which I'm trying to rectify. I can't offer you keys to the city. I can't knight you, but I can thank you for such a wonderful institution that you built and that we have all enjoyed for many years, and we look forward to enjoying for many years to come. So thank you very much, Stan.
Hi everybody. Back in 2008, I started a workshop at the Landon Library. Kind of a spill-off from Poetry London. They had a workshop, but they only workshopped 2 local poets each night. And I thought, well, that's not enough for this community. So we started this workshop, and one of the first participants that came to my workshop was Stan. So that's back in 2008. And he was the shy guy, and he let me know that back then too. And over the years, Stan grew and his poetry grew. But you know, some of the things I just found out about you tonight that I never knew. You worked for the Calgary Herald. My best friend was editor at the Calgary Herald. You probably know him. We'll talk about that later on. Yeah. Anyway, Stan participated fully in my workshops for the 5 years or whatever it was that it ran, and it was always a willing participant. Remember, the one thing he had trouble with, the way that I had the new poems read, is one person would read a line, and then we'd pass it on to the next person. They would read the next line and the next line, and that bothered you for some reason, didn't it? Anyway, here we are 9 years later, and you have created this venue for poetry, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience for me to come here and read, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this. Thank you for all of the hard work that you put into this. Thank you very much, Stan.
you're very courageous for starting this, and I was delighted when you started it. But were you anxious? Oh my God. There were a few times some customers stayed here because we were overflowing, and Stan just got so angry. But it was all because of your anxiety. But over the years, Stan, you really have come a long way. And I can see that anxiety just diminishing slowly and slowly. And we're discovering your own richness. So you need to be discovered more, and I guess you're discovering your own richness. So it was a pleasure having you start this lovely venue. Thank you.
And of course, Heidi is the owner of Mykonos restaurant. So I think Stan is going to conclude this part, and then we actually have a cake, and then we'll have a break and have the open mic. So Stan, we're going to let you finish however you'd like to, and then cake.
Cake? Geez, maybe we should start on that right now. Yeah, I just have some thank yous of my own. I did not do this by myself. Especially to Linda. Where is she? Oh, there she is. I looked at the back table. Yeah, she's in the kitchen with the cake there. For her endless support since the beginning, even though it caused her much pain because of her empathy for my own anxiety. And thanks to Linda for manning the book table as well all these 5 seasons, which was also very painful because of her shyness, but which she undertook with great courage at each event, including this last one. Thanks, sweetie. Yeah, now, you know, if I had a clone, an unmarried clone, would I have done this? Probably not. Who knows? A huge thanks to Mary Dowds. For answering my help wanted ad. I had been getting desperate for somebody to take my place and was beginning to think I might have to stay on another year. But at the last minute, Mary came. She's enthusiastic and can do nearly everything I've been doing to keep the open mic going month to month, season to season. And actually, she's much better than me with organization. And thanks to Kevin Heslop.
Stand up, Kevin.
For agreeing to be co-organizer with Mary Dowds. Kevin will bring his understanding of the community that London Open Mic is a part of, and his ability to extend the work of the open mic out into that community and its institutions and people. He will also, of course, carry on conducting those great interviews. Thanks to Joan Clayton. Stand up, Joan. For hosting the open mic section of the event the last few seasons. She brings her positive, sparkling personality to the event, something we've come to expect as a necessary part of the open mic. And thanks to Sebastian Rydzewski with the headphones on, who has been volunteering his professional videography service, putting in a lot of time and energy in the process. Sebastian is not a poet, but a freelance, self-employed, computer skills service provider hoping to increase his client base. So to keep him coming to our events, creating a permanent archive on YouTube of our poets' readings. If you can use any of his services or know anyone who might be able to, please talk to him. And thanks to Brittany Renaud for helping organize guerrilla poetry and other outside events. And thanks to Andy Vervoom for taking up the challenge we offered of organizing a new reading series, which he did with much creativity and energy, creating his very popular couplet series. And really, if you haven't been to it, you gotta go. It's totally unique. Also to Frank Beltrano and Andreas Grip, neither of whom are here. Andreas Grip has moved to Goderich. And actually the first event of his new poetry series is tonight, so he couldn't be here. Thanks to Frank and Andreas for helping me get the open mic started and for suggesting we use Mykonos as our venue. And thank God we have it. And thanks to Debbie Oakenhill for her support over the years. Also thanks to Donna Perry, who isn't here now, but she hosted during our early years. And if I had to host for any more events than those first few, I probably would have had a heart attack considering the stress. Thanks to Heidi and Bill. Anyway, for our venue, and what a beautiful place it is. I mean, how could you get a better spot for poetry readings? And for not charging us. You guys are paying them with your beer money. Thanks to all the poets who featured during these 5 years for volunteering their time and energy. And thanks to all the open mic readers who've made London Open Mic what it is, their community. And for making it such a pleasure to attend. And for me personally, thanks to everyone for proving to my subconscious that its terrible fear of not being accepted was simply wrong. It requires proof. You can't just tell it. That's what I discovered. You got to prove to it. Amazingly, you kept coming, no matter how poorly I performed on the stage, or what stupid social blunders I made. It took a long time for that to sink in, but it did. So thank you all.
Sorry, this is a Stan Happy thing. I don't know how many of you read that wonderful interview Kevin did that Stan replied on online. And Stan, didn't you say that one of your ambitions was to make, if the open mic could persuade one person to move to London, right? Well, I have to announce that there may be others, but I'm one, and I'm actually planning to move to London, and it's entirely because of the atmosphere of and the culture of this event. So there you go.
Honestly, so we have someone who's just come from England. We have you who, I don't know, okay, and you know, Robin is the truth, and as Marie Antoinette said, let them eat cake.
Also, two short life-changing announcements. Sebastian last week had a baby boy. Yep. And Hino last week got married. How about that? And I sent my poem to the CBC conference.